Hi, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. This is our third of 3 webinars that are going to cover cross-sell data and the COVID-19 impact that the pandemic has had on the automotive industry. Very excited to get started. I wanted to welcome all of our active clients, prospective clients, and members of the press on this call. My name is Megan Saxon. I am the Director of Partnerships here at Cross-Sell. And I think that it's safe to say that all of us who are affected by or are in the automotive industry can take a bit of a sigh of relief. And hopefully the numbers presented to you today will allow you to do that. We are really looking more and more like we are having a V-shaped recovery. And I'll show you a lot about what that looks like today. Here's our agenda. I'll quickly cover about cross-sell, just some commonly asked questions about our data. And then we're going to jump into 4 markets that we've been covering the past 3 months. This is our third of 3 webinars, so we'll see what the status is with those 3 markets. And then I'll hand it over to Alan Faith, who is going to cover some buyer profiles that we've noticed have had interesting return to market journeys, and then we'll wrap up with the domestic versus import quick report. Real quick, just about cross-sell. This is our availability across the U.S. We buy state and title registration data, more specifically title transfer data from all of these states in red. What that means is we are purchasing from these states the data that they have posted as it relates to the title transfers that they have had from the following month. A lot of questions we get are, well, why don't you have the rest of these states that are showing up in gray? And the answer is because those states don't sell registration data. So our company has opted to not cover any data that comes from that state. There's a lot of different ways that a lot of our competitors in the space are covering sales data in those states that don't provide registration data. And we can certainly get into what those are. But ultimately, we've decided that we like our registration data and we're going to cover the states in red as best we can. The other commonly asked question that we get is, well, what percent of the US market does your data cover? So we estimate that the states in red cover about 65% of the US market. And we can make a lot of inferences based on 65% of the US market, which you'll see here today. One of the things that we have been really fortunate to be a major source for a lot of news publications, including the ones you see up here right now. And the reason why the media has chosen to rely on us so heavily, especially the financial media, is because our data comes out very quickly. It is now June 15th, and we have gotten all of the states where we have coverage. We have all of their data in our platform now, so our dealers, who make up most of our client base, have access to the data from May 2020. And that makes us one of the fastest data companies in the automotive space, and the reason why a lot of companies rely on us for our data. Okay, let's jump into the COVID-19 impact on US auto sales. I think that all of you, by the time this webinar ends, you're going to feel a lot better about where we are as it relates to US auto sales. I'm going to start just outlining the markets that you're about to see: LA, Chicago, Detroit, and New York. We have gone ahead and we've taken a central zip code in each of those markets, and we drew a 50-mile radius outside of those markets, and we're going to be covering sales that have happened inside of that 50-mile radius. So we're not going to be covering areas like Desert Hot Springs out here. We are focusing on the more centralized zip codes in each of these upcoming markets. All right, let's start with Los Angeles. So you can see we have taken some of the top performing dealers in this market. Longo Toyota, Galpin Honda, Santa Monica Ford Lincoln, Fletcher Jones Motor Cars. These are your top performers in this market historically. Longo Toyota is the #1 volume store in the U.S. Fletcher Jones Motor Cars, Mercedes-Benz. This is the historically #1 Mercedes-Benz dealer in the U.S. So this is a very high volume market for these franchises. You can see that in March, as we covered before, that their numbers really remained flat from February to March. There wasn't a whole lot of movement here. In fact, we all think that most of these sales happened in the first 2 weeks, and what would have happened would have been quite a miracle. They probably would have sold a lot more had the pandemic not been there. And then in April, we obviously see a very sharp decline, not for some franchises, but certainly for some of these top performers. And then in May, we see a little bit of recovery start to happen. Fletcher Jones had a bit of a dive, but some of these other retailers did begin to see some improvements at their store as it relates to May 2020. So this is the month-over-month change for these two of the most recent months. And we try to pull a decent amount of franchises so we can get a good representation of what each franchise is doing in those markets. And Alan's going to talk a little bit later about the return to market as it relates to buyer profiles and certainly specific brands. Okay, so taking those same dealers and looking at the year-over-year change, you can see that LA still has a little bit of a ways to go. We did not see quite a recovery in the year-over-year numbers that we'd like to, but this is certainly not worse than April 2019 to April 2020 that we looked at last month, and this is where these retailers stand in this market. And then when we go to look at Los Angeles as a whole, we pull all those dealers together and pull that entire market and all the cars sold in that market, and we get this number, which is still quite a rainy day. I mean, we're nowhere near the volume that we had in January, February, but we're certainly, the LA market is certainly picking back up. As you can see, a 2.2% increase from the April numbers in May, and only down 5% from April to May, 10% from April to May as well. So you can see those starting to pick back up slowly but surely. Oh, it looks like I had a little bit of a, so they probably had more of like a 3% decline year over year. So it looks like I had a little bit of an error there. But 66,000 total cars sold in the LA market for May 2020. When you put those numbers to year over year, you get about a 42% decline in year over year sales. So LA market certainly still not out of the pandemic slump. Still a long way to go, and I know that probably has something to do with the fact that they have been a lot slower to reopen than some of the other states we're about to cover. Okay, moving over to Chicago. Same thing, we took a central zip code in Chicago, and we drew a radius of 50 miles outside of that central zip code. So that's where you're gonna see this data come in from, okay? Similar to Los Angeles, we chose the top 5 performers in that market. These are certainly dealerships that you're going to see in the top 10, top 50 in this market. And so you can see they had quite a bounce back from April to May in their month-over-month change. Very, very good news for Chicago. Really glad to see these numbers in the green. As you can see, still nowhere near where they once were, especially in January, before the pandemic hit, but it's really nice to see that they are on the road upward for sure. Taking those same dealers with a year-over-year comparison, you can see that the year-over-year change is, again, not as bad as it was in April, but is still on a decline when you put the numbers in a year-over-year fashion. But still, this isn't the worst thing considered, but I think that they're certainly on the road to recovery, similar to Los Angeles, if not in a slightly better position than Los Angeles. Okay, now we pull this entire zip code and pull all those dealers together and the sales that they made in that market, and this is what we get. We get a month-over-month change, 107%. I mean, what a relief. If you're in the Chicago market, you should really feel a lot better about that. Don't stop what you're doing. You know, keep on pushing for sales. Keep on with the incentives. I think we're going to need them for another month or two just to get back to performance like we were really in January and February. So, but that's really nice to see that upward movement in the Chicago market. And of course, when you compare the year-over-year numbers, you can tell that we still have a little bit of a ways to go. About 33% decline when you compare May 2020 to May 2019. All right, Detroit. Now, this is where it gets pretty exciting in the Motor City. If you're someone who is thinking that this V-shaped recovery may or may not happen, I mean, this is really proof that, yeah, it's happening. April could not have gotten much worse for the Detroit area and some of these top volume stores. Bill Brown Ford, always a leader, historic dealership, heavy domestic market, and they are nowhere near where they were, but certainly, I mean, a 294% increase, just incredible performance. And this is really where you're going to see that V-shaped recovery. I mean, you can almost call this back to normal for the Detroit market. So that's very exciting. If you're in Detroit, you should be thrilled about this progress. All right, and then the year-over-year change, really not that bad. 8.4%, 7.1. I mean, these are numbers that dealers are familiar with. This is not the worst thing to see. A little decline year over year, but Detroit is almost there, and you can see Taylor Ford in a positive increase year over year sales as well. So this is a really good day for the Detroit market in May 2020. Again, man, you just can't. This is just awesome to see. They really, it can't get much worse than April 2020. And to see 44,000 cars in this market is just incredible. And this change is really, really positive. When you compare, again, when you compare year over year, you're getting something different. It's a different story. It's a different day. But again, all things considered, this is not a total wipeout. We still have a little ways to go in Detroit, but we have certainly some declines year over year, but it will continue to be a good day in that market, I believe. All right, New York City. There was really doom and gloom when we covered this data last month, and there has been some major uphill changes. Positive changes for the better in the New York City market. And you can see that here in these numbers. I mean, some of these stores, BMW Bayside, 0 cars in April 2020, really was not a good day. I think the vast majority of dealerships were closed in April 2020, and you can tell that they have reopened and really picked right back up. So it's good to see the New York City market get some positive results. It was certainly a rainy day when we last spoke about New York. Year over year, still not where they were, but certainly trending upward from April. So you can see here we have about it looks like on average, this might be about a 50% decline, a little bit more. But ultimately, slowly getting back to normal. I know New York City was hit very hard, obviously, by the pandemic, so they are probably going to be a lot slower to recover than some of the other markets. Okay, and then it's great to see them also recover from a market-based approach. Again, May 2020, 28,000 cars, much better than March and April, so it's good to see them on the rise here in May 2020. And really, really exciting to also see that they outperformed their results from May 2019. So that's a really good sign for the New York City market. New car sales only 1% loss, and that's really impressive to see them dig their way out of the hole that they were in April. So really good news for the auto community. I think we can all breathe a sigh of relief here, especially if you're selling cars in the New York City market. All right, let's look really quickly at all 24 states. So here's where we are as it relates to year-over-year sales, May 2020 to May 2019. Again, clearly we are not out of this pandemic yet, and we are still going to want to and need to get where we need to be to outperform our year-over-year results. So by no means is this over, but there are some positive changes which occurred in New York and Maine. Really good to see that, and we still have a long ways to go, probably most likely through the end of the year, until we're fully recovered from this pandemic, in which we might really truly never be. But these are the numbers in each of the states that we have access to at Cross-Sell. Okay, so where does that leave us with the US as a whole? From April to May, we have a 57.25 increase from April to May 2020. So that's very good. That digs us out quite a bit. 23% increase in new car sales, 74% increase in used car sales, and overall 57% increase across the US. So exciting to see that. You know, we have outperformed April certainly, but haven't outperformed any other months that have occurred in this year. And we'll continue to hopefully see some positive trends from the US overall. Whoops, forgot one. Again, 33% decrease from May 2019. By no means are we out of this again, but certainly better situation than last month. And we hope that with the reopening across several states that US Auto will continue to rise and follow that ideally V-shaped recovery that we're hoping for so bad. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Alan Faith. Alan is the National Sales Director for Cross-Sell. He is one of the leading analysts here at our team. I get to work with Alan every day, and it is a great pleasure. He knows a lot about this market, is in our data every day, working with dealers, explaining a lot of the nuances of our data. And without further ado, Alan.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks, it's great to be here, and thanks for everyone in attendance. Well, like Megan said, we're going to take a look at the 3 buyer profiles that we see coming back to market and how they're going to return. We've broken those up into 3 categories. We've classified them as highly qualified, which we are going to consider buyers with a credit score north of 720. And these are going to be people that were probably not highly affected by the pandemic. And then we're going to take a look at the middle class, and we're going to consider that to be buyers with a credit score between 670 and 719. These are going to be cautious buyers, people that really want to see what the long game is. They want to wait and see how things are going to play out before they're going to go out and make these big ticket purchases. And then we have the subprime buyer. That's going to be a buyer with a credit score between 580 and 669. These are people that receive their stimulus checks, and it created an opportunity for them to go out and buy a vehicle, maybe put down a down payment that they could not afford previously. So it created some opportunity for them, and they were ready to get out there and take advantage of that. If we go ahead and jump to the next slide, Megan. Here, we're going to take a look at our segments and models by year report. It's a report that we offer, and it shows what models are moving in a specific market, state, or in this case, all states. It's going to show us what segment they fall into and then what model years are selling the best. And so we look at this to determine what's moving, what people are buying, and we always see a spike in the 2 to 3 most recent model years. That's because of vehicles coming off lease. As they come back to market, there's always a large number of them. So it's always, you're going to see a spike there. We've seen a much higher spike in May because with that stimulus check, we've seen a lot of subprime buyers come into the market, and they're able to put a down payment on a late model, low mileage vehicle and get that vehicle into a monthly payment that maybe they couldn't afford previously. And we see that in the numbers. Although it's always a spike in that 2 to 3 year range, it's never quite as substantial as what we're seeing here. For example, if you look at the F-150 there, we're looking at over 6,300 2018s. That's a huge difference, more than we would typically see. Roughly 5,200 in the Chevy Silverado 1500. So like I said, it's allowing these subprime or low to fair credit score buyers come into the market, put a large down payment on a vehicle that they may not have been able to previously, so they could afford a monthly payment, and they're taking advantage of that. They were probably the first ones we saw back to market. We're still seeing them, but that's probably starting to dwindle down a bit now, as most of those people have already bought the vehicle that they were looking to buy. Next slide, please. This is our finance source report. It's going to show us who's buying paper in a market. And here we're looking at Chicago. We're looking at this because we see Capital One and Ally Financial way out in front. This just further backs up what we sort of expected to see, with the subprime buyer being the first back to market, with Capital One and Ally financing some of those lower credit scores, some of those fair credit scores. We see they are miles out in front of everyone behind them, with Capital One having almost 12% of the used market in Chicago for May. So again, these subprime buyers came to market with that stimulus check. It allowed them to make that down payment on that vehicle that they wanted, and then they got financed by Capital One or Ally. And again, this just further substantiates our theories on that being the first buyer back to market. Next slide, please. Now we're going to take a look at the highly qualified buyer. Again, that's going to be our buyers with a score north of 720, maybe not highly affected by the pandemic. These are people that are going to be opportunistic buyers. They're going to take advantage of the offerings and these huge incentives that the manufacturers are putting out there. We're seeing 0% for 84 months. People are seeing that even if they weren't necessarily ready to buy a vehicle. They're going to take advantage because they qualify for these incentives. They're seeing low prices on the vehicle and 0% over 84 months. They're going to buy now. They're probably not going to see an offering like that again. So just take advantage of it. Jump on it while you can. So we see the subprime buyer come back to market immediately with the stimulus check. Then we see the highly qualified buyer follow in right behind as the incentives come out from the manufacturers. And then last back to market is going to be that middle class. So those people with a 670 to 719 score, your average buyer, these people are going to be extremely cautious. They want to see what is going to happen. Are we going to have another outbreak this fall that's going to push us back into quarantine again? Could force another round of layoffs or furloughs. The level of uncertainty is just keeping them away from the market right now. It's going to be really interesting in the coming months to see when they return, and I think they will sooner than later as things start to level out. There's also going to be some outside factors that could help influence that, and we'll touch on those in just a minute. Next slide, please. So we're going to quickly take a look at the domestic versus import, as I think it plays a role with some of the incentives and the different things we've been looking at. So if we can jump to the next slide, Megan. What we see is imports out in front of the domestic market. Going back into December, January, everything held pretty steady. In April, it was really interesting to see that things almost leveled. In May, it stayed the same way. The theory there is these huge incentives being offered by some of the domestic manufacturers has decreased that gap and made it a level playing field. So we're seeing all of these people going out and they're buying new and they're buying domestic. And it's really flattened things out, which is extremely interesting. And I'm anxious to see how this plays in the long run. In summary, we have seen and continue to see the subprime market bounce back. A lot of those stimulus checks and subprime buyers, they probably came in and helped keep a lot of our dealers afloat when things were really lean. I think we're starting to see that slow. A lot of that stimulus money has already been spent. The highly qualified buyers quickly followed suit and took advantage of the offers that were out there. As these offers start to go away, will the buyers go away as well? Because again, a lot of these buyers were not necessarily in the market for a vehicle right away, but they're opportunistic and they saw an opportunity there. They jumped on it. They bought a vehicle while there were these great incentives and offers out there. GM was offering 0% over 84 months. They've already backed that up to 72. How long will it be before they back that to 0% over 60? The incentives are starting to drop. But with that being said, in this time frame, we talked about off-lease vehicles coming to the market routinely, and we always have a spike in those 2 to 3-year-old vehicles. Throughout the shutdown, these people were not able to turn in their vehicles that were coming off lease. So those have been backing up. Well, they're all about to come to market. So we're going to see a huge influx of 2 to 3-year-old vehicles coming to market. It was also reported last week that Hertz is about to dump 30,000 cars to liquidate some cash. So you're going to see 30,000 cookie cutter cars, just standard package, no frills cars come to market. You're going to see a lot of these off-lease vehicles come to market. With this excessive inventory, we're probably going to see prices drop again. So you're going to see late model, low mileage vehicles coming to market at an affordable price. This could bring that middle class buyer back. Maybe they were wavering and trying to determine if it's a good time to buy, should they hold off? But when they see that 2-year-old low mileage vehicle come to market at a price you can't beat, they may jump on it. We're excited to see what happens. Excited to see the June data. June, July, and August should really be interesting. So far, the data has backed up everything we expected to see as far as who was going to return to market and when. We anticipate it will hold the same. All right, Megan, you can move to the next slide.
All right. Well, I don't think I saw any questions, but if you have any, please feel free to email us, send us your feedback, info@crosssell.com. Again, this is our third of 3 webinars that we have planned to run due to the pandemic, and I know there was a lot of curiosity about the state of the auto industry. We will definitely be doing these periodically, so follow us on LinkedIn, on Twitter and Facebook to get some updates about the state of the auto industry as it relates to the COVID-19 impact. But this will be our last webinar. Thank you so much for joining us, and please follow us for some future updates. Thanks, Alan, for coming on and giving us that interesting content, and we will see you guys sometime in the future. Thanks so much.